We are privileged to be in New York today, and we are live with the man of New York himself, the one and only Rickford Burke of the Caribbean Guyana Institute of Democracy. Rickford, good afternoon and welcome, my brother. Good to be here with you.
Welcome to New York. You sound like a New Yorker.
Good to be here with you, man.
We outside.
Yeah. We outside, literally outside.
Literally, it's kind of hot, but welcome to
it's
New
good
York
weather.
weather.
It's good weather. I rather the heat than the snow.
I know.
Any day.
But you here so often, it's like you from
No,
here.
the after party. I'm supposed to be just getting some rest here, after a grueling couple months. But you've been even busier, Rickford. Again, you're president of the Caribbean Guyana Institute of Democracy here in New York. What have you guys been up to?
Before I get to that, I noticed you acting like a young boy kissing over the bridge and all that.
Rekindling things.
I know. CGN is a very active organization. Outside of what we do in Guyana, we're very active here in the United States in terms of our community and educating members of our community, not only the Guyanese community, but the Caribbean American community, African community, whomever is willing to listen. Right now, we're gearing up for the elections. We'll run a voter information campaign here in the states where we have lots of Caribbean Americans and Guyanese, Florida, of course, New York, Michigan, the key ones that are battleground states, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. We have, in terms of Georgia, we have some work to do. We've been talking to our elected officials. Guyanese in Georgia are very, just like in New York, very disgruntled with the Biden administration for not taking action in terms of formulating a more pragmatic U.S. foreign policy towards Guyana, ensuring that there's accountability with the PP government in with regard to the death squad investigation, that fraud killing investigations. That has not happened. We've been pushing the administration to have that done. Join the United Nations in terms of having those investigations done. It must be done. It must be done. We're dissatisfied with the way the State Department has been handling Guyana. Mm-hmm. Some of them in the State Department, including Secretary of State Brian Nichols, parrot the trash and propaganda from the PP administration. And I know when Kamala Harris wins, I hope he's not there, mm-hmm. because I think he has created some problems for the Biden-Harris administration. Haitians are complaining, dissatisfied with his lack of action. Guyanese are complaining. Other members from other Americans from other parts of whose heritage is from other parts of the Western Hemisphere. So that's a shot at Brian Nichols, but I think he deserves it. Other than that, we're working hard to give legal assistance to Caribbean Americans who need legal assistance here in the United States, whether immigration or we have criminal liability. And of more recent, we have been working with other non-profit organizations to help the African and Spanish migrants, mm-hmm. that have flooded the United States, and more particularly New York. We get clothing, we get food, we get footwear for them, and we encourage some of them to do English courses, and we've coordinated some of that. So we're active.
Yeah, and we feel the effects of that activism on the ground in Guyana.
Well, based on how many times Barjani calls my name, I can tell.
Every press conference almost. And one of the things is that the PPP has become very interested in you in recent years. While I think some of it can be taken lightly, we saw some of the effects of that. The law enforcement officers traveling till over here, assuming that they have jurisdiction here for some reason. Didn't see much become of that. And quite recently, we saw the Fugitive Offenders Amendment Bill coming to the National Assembly. This is largely believed to be focused on persons like you, enabling the U.S. to extradite you back to Guyana for questioning, like Jamal Khashoggi, by the administration. Are you bothered by any of this?
Absolutely not. First of all, I am not in any way concerned with the nonsense that they're doing. I think they're trying to act like Russia to intimidate what can be considered as dissidents. I know they're targeting me. I'm not afraid of them because I believe in an eye for an eye. So they must be very conscious of that philosophy or that doctrine whenever they try to target me. Also, and they could take it as a threat or however they want. But it's meant to intimidate critics, and they're after me because of my influence in the United States. They think that they can stay in Guyana and get the police force to frame people in America. That in itself is so objectionable, reprehensible, and people in Guyana, even those who support the PNC, even blacks in the PPP, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Onij Waldron, and some of the more despicable undesirables, they sit and watch this nonsense. And I want them to know that they will be out of government. And I dare say, Sharad, when they are out of government, we must do the exact same to them. I make bold to say they must not be allowed to live in Guyana. They must be sent into exile. Anil Nanlal boldly said that you guys will have to run and leave the country. They must run and leave the country. If they must be arrested, not for being framed. I'm a human rights activist, not for being framed. I don't believe in framing people. But they have committed so many crimes. They are so corrupt. They've committed so many human rights violations that they must be prosecuted.
And this is the kind of nuanced difference I want people to administrate. When you say, for instance, an eye for an eye, is as I heard Raphael Chapman say many years ago, politics is about giving blows and receiving blows too. So you do something and we return the favor in like form. Once there, as you said, there's justice, there's credible information to act on. There's lots of that in the case of the PPP. And that should be acted upon. No,
they're framing themselves. They're actually committing crimes. Look what's happening in the Ghana police force, and the government is I'll come to that. But they're committing crimes. We don't have to frame them, and they must be prosecuted. And I believe that they must be held, just like what they did to Mark Benchcup, what they've done to so many other people. You notice every black person, so long as they're a credible political opponent, they have a criminal case, including you.
Yeah.
Well, I think yours might have been dismissed.
I still go one before the court.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well, how dare these people target black people like this and try to make us criminals? We must do the same thing to them. I look in the camera and say, we must do the same thing for them. And that's why I'm so upset with David Granger for not holding them accountable for legitimate crimes. Listen, Sherrod, they must be held, they must be detained, they must be prosecuted. If they want a damn phone call, they must be denied. Let them go to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Treat them the same way that they treat black people. The same way. I mean, I have to say black people, because I live in America, and because of acts of discrimination against black, we highlight it. I'm not scared to make the difference because the PPP tries to intimidate us from pointing out their racism against black people by calling us racist. I'm not scared of that label because I'm standing up for the rights of black people. I'm an Afro-Guyanese. I stand up for the rights of everybody, all people. But in particular, because Afro-Guyanese are under threat of subjugation and modern slavery by the PPP, we must point it out. And we will have to stamp it out. Our generation will stamp it out. We mustn't leave it for our children. This generation must end PPP racism in Guyana.
And I want to deal with that frontally, Rickford. What you have mentioned here, because it's very important as we address this whole issue of racism in Guyana, because it has some very, very deep roots. And I want to come back to something people might be more familiar with, more than just Rickford Burke saying that Freddie Kissoon, one of their boys now, wrote extensively on this. And I like to say when Freddie had his sanity. And the seminal work is a paper called Ethnic Power and Ideological Racism, Comparing Presidencies in Guyana. So don't take Rickford's work for it. In this paper, Freddie said, among other things, for instance, even if one argues that when old parties are defeated and newer ones win elections, there are changes in personnel. The situation in Guyana, this is 2010 and previously he was talking about, is the total, in the total public realms, he said, it cannot be easily explained, save and except you take into context racial engineering. In another part of this paper, he said, there's a relentless, almost frenetic process of African disappearance in all dimensions of substantial power in Guyana. This is the period of Barra Jagdio's presidency. So this is not just talking about racism in Guyana. Here is a then academic who talked about the systematic racism operating under the PPPC. I just want to give it context here, Rickford.
Yeah, and before I mention that, I want to come back to something I omitted to mention, and it's this police targeting of me. I want Guyanese to understand this. When they sent Sarabo to my house, it was a very dangerous situation. He could have been killed. Mm-hmm. He could have been shot and killed. And what would have been their explanation for sending somebody to threaten me? Basically, they came to intimidate and threaten me with guns to my home. And I guarantee you that if they try that again, the person that is not going to go back to Guyana. They will face justice, however that form that justice takes.
As many persons said you dealt with that very, very calmly.
Well, I had to because it was my Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe in violating my Sabbath. I don't believe in violence either. And I want to say to Guyanese in this United States and in any other part of the world that they threaten to send police officers, assert your right, maximum rights under the law. In the United States, in some states, I think 11 states, there's stand your ground, where you can use deadly force if you are perceived to be threatened. Yeah. And Sarabo and his accomplice came to my home in a very threatening posture with weapons. And under those circumstances, you are justified to use deadly force in this country. And the Guyana police force and the PPP government, they're playing a dangerous game. And I have no doubt that if they try it again, that there'll be severe consequences. We won't wait for law enforcement. We won't wait for the US government to take 1 year to investigate or whatever it is. We will take action, including maximum use and application of the law.
So let's talk about that a little bit and bring it under the banner of, using law enforcement, using the courts, for instance, mm-hmm. to prosecute political opponents and what lots of persons deem as the weaponizing of the court system. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have a trial that just commenced where persons like Keith Lowenfield, our former chief elections officer, Roxanne Myers, the deputy chief, Clement Mingo, Enrique Levan, Michelle Miller, Carolyn Duncan, Duart Hetzberger, they were all charged under what they call electoral fraud offenses. But lots of folks know these are.
Well, they're not charged with electoral offensive. Mm-hmm. They're charged with misconduct in public office. I'm not sure what that is and how that is applicable. Mm-hmm. I saw Sonia Parag I read what is reported to have been her testimony, and it's a joke. It's a joke. They charge Vola Lawrence with a conspiracy. Now, a conspiracy means that there must be an agreement. I hope that they can prove that in court.
Carol Joseph is charged. Yeah,
but it is not to prove anything in court. It is to harass you. It is to tarnish you as a criminal. That's what they're doing. They're using the police force. The Guyana police force has disintegrated into the personal security apparatus, an oppressive apparatus of the PPP. You notice this big scandal, hundreds of millions of dollars that the government is supporting. The government is refusing to do anything. I'm shocked that Clifford Hicken is still a police commissioner. But we're going to come to that. But I agree with you, the Guyana police force is being weaponized. I believe the entire leadership structure should be disbanded, and they should bring in international law enforcement experts to retrain some of the officers. Some of them should be sent home. There should be a commission of inquiry into the Guyana police force framing people, hiding evidence, covering up murders. Mm-hmm. I happen to know that Sarabo was giving information to international law enforcement. I just don't want to embarrass him. Mm-hmm. I happen to know that Sarabo was allegedly responsible for some of the information that came out with regard to the cover-up of the Paper Shorts murder. But if they have confidence in him, I wish him well. I noticed he wasn't recommended for promotion, but they recommended Caesar for promotion. And let me say this. Mitchell Caesar came to this country and was running some sort of operation against me under the pretext of an investigation. Law enforcement intelligence pointed to the fact that he was trying to get hitmen to target me. Mitchell Caesar from the Guyana Police Force, from CID, head of major crimes, came to this country and it was engaged in criminal activity.
Wow. Isn't that called transnational repression?
Transnational repression crimes.
Yeah.
And it's being investigated still by both federal and local law enforcement. And I dare him to deny it. And I'm calling his name boldly. Mitchell Caesar, Superintendent Mitchell Caesar from the Guyana Police Force, came to New York under the pretext of investigating me and was trying to hire a hitman to target me. The Attorney General also was here before that and tried to engage in the same type of activity. And that matter too, as far as I know, is under investigation. And that's one of the reasons why we believe the State Department need major change should there be a Harris administration, because the PPP government and their operatives have been coming to the United States and doing what Russians and the Chinese do, which is targeting their citizens who oppose them, speak out against them, and in some cases, plotting to kill them. And the State Department has not acted adequately, they have not acted judiciously, and they have not acted expeditiously to hold them to account.
Yeah, but I'm certain that all Guyanese are going to be very, very shocked by these very damning allegations that Rickford, you've just mentioned there.
Yes.
But on the side of this prosecution, whether they utilize the Guyana police force or they weaponize the courts, is the fact that some of their folks have seemed to benefit from the court system. We had in the case of Weaponization himself, several charges, very, very serious offenses dropped. And Nandlal himself, our Attorney General, saw several charges against him dropped. Ashley Singh, Vincent Bassington, our chief elections, our chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission herself, had some private criminal charges dropped. We had no reasons proffered to the public. So they seem to benefit greatly from the system. But on the other side of that, quite recently, we saw no less a person than Mr. Jagdo himself castigating the court system, castigating the magistracy for what he said, dragging their feet on these election cases. So they seem to want a certain outcome without due process being followed.
Well, they believe in ethnic supremacy. That's ethnic supremacy. They believe that PPP East Indians are above the law, and others who tag along as part of their cabal, they're above the law. And so we have two justice systems: one for the PPP, one for PPP East Indians, and another for those who are their puppets, right? And it shouldn't be. And that's why I said we have to stamp out, root out PPP, racism, and corruption in Guyana. The PPP controls every aspect of national life in Guyana, even probably who's going to catch fish. They control that. They want to control who must use the national park. They want to control how blacks must celebrate. They want to control who must coordinate emancipation. They want to control who must speak for blacks at the United Nations. They want to control everything. They want to control the oil. They want to control the court system. They want to. They believe They believe in a one-party ethnocratic state, and we must uproot it. We must uproot it. And listen, for decades, the PPP has been trying to decimate the black population. In 1964, they killed black people, burned their homes, burned their villages. There was no consequence. Thousands of people died, or hundreds, or how much you want, including they bombed the Son Chapman boat.
Yeah.
From
Recently had a commemoration.
43 people died. They shot and killed the protesters in Linden who were protesting against electricity hike. No consequences. Bar Jagdo formed death squads that murdered over 1,400 young black men. No consequences. They set up their death squads now on the Irvin Alley that killed, or in Boston, that killed Kevin Andrews, that killed Quindon Bacchus. Then you had the Henry Boys murders. that were committed by PPP supporters in Region 5 that the police force protected and harassed the family till their mothers died because of the harassment of the Guyana police? No justice, no consequences. For decades, the PPP has committed terrorism against blacks, racial discrimination against black. They've murdered us. They've burned our villages. They've killed our people, burned our homes. No consequences. This generation must end it. If I believe if one more black person is killed by the PPP, there must be such severe consequences that they must either end up in jail or they must never again be able to govern Guyana.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that, about the police force disposition seemingly to aid and abet in the atrocities of the PPP. And we've had several missteps for the police force since August 2020. We saw the police force fire the chaplain because the chaplain prayed against corruption in the Ghana police force. We had lots of interference by the police and lots of issues. We saw what happened with the Paul Slow, for instance, the Police Service Commission. We've had the Karimbash report on the conduct of that senior policeman. We've saw several court cases involved in the Guyana police force and the damning commentary by the Chief Justice on people like Calvin Brutus, who you've mentioned there. We saw the top brass in the Guyana police force. You mentioned Oren Boston told us that they didn't know who ordered this operation that killed Oren Boston. So clearly a rogue police force. We keep seeing rather people being shot and killed under some very, very mysterious circumstances, like Oren Boss and several others. What is happening in the Guyana police force? We come now to these very damning allegations of corruption quite recently. I dare say the vice president said that he had no problem with SOCO, arm of the police force for all intents and purposes, investigating this matter with Brutus and the others. And the Georgian Chambers of Commerce, for instance, come out and say that no. What's happening in the Guyana police force is untenable. This needs an independent investigation.
Well, they don't want it to be an independent because they don't want the facts to come out. That's the first thing. They support it because, one, they want to use black people now that the international community is watching Guyana and that we've been exposing their corruption and their atrocities. They want blacks to commit crimes against blacks. They have now, They have now conferred upon some rogue blacks, house slaves, some slave catchers, the privilege of executing their racist plan against black people, right? So you have Kwame McCoy, who will go to Mocha and custody black people for the racist East Indians in the PPP. Then you have Clifford Hicken, who is willing to kill black people, who has allegedly ordered, because he was the commander of the killing of black people. You have Clifford Hicken, who got police to go and shoot protesters on behalf of the racists in the PPP. And then you have other slave catchers in the government who are blacks willing to do the dirty work of the PPP. So they don't have to do it. By the time they could afford to jump up and talk about, this and that and that. Brutus and Hicken and all of these guys who they handpicked and put in there, all of whom had discipline issues, including Karimbash, allegations of sexual misconduct, promoted to head of SOCO. Brutus was facing discipline and he sued the police force to end that. And the Chief Justice dismissed it and said it was self-serving. And the PPP overlooked all of that. Why? Because the PPP is accustomed to acting in a criminal way and getting away with it. So if they can overlook those crimes and have it as a sort of Damocles dangling over these guys' head and say, hey, you go there and keep the black population in check. And if you don't, we're going to drop this sword. Then that's what Hickens and Brutus and all of the others will do. And what you have now is the Indianization of the leadership of the Guyana police force, as we saw with the scandal with promotion, where they can skip 23 people and supersede 6 people to make Bacchus the commander for Region 6. And he's so young. And if you could skip these black officers who have worked and served in the force so long, for decades. If you can, and they're in their 50s and late 40s and nearing retirement age, and you can supersede them and leave them at that stage so that they could just retire without getting their benefits at a higher level. It shows how evil they are.
And this is what, again, I want to circle back to this paper that Freddie wrote many years ago, Ethnic Power and Ideological Racism, because this is a framework that was shown in this paper. We had in the past there, education officials, same way, superseded,
Yep.
by much younger persons, not even close to being aptly qualified. But again, this seems to be the playbook of the PPP, and it's all over again.
Yep.
I was coming to that, this promotion list that costs so much angst, and not because persons were qualified to be promoted, experienced to be promoted, and they were being skipped in any way. But this is what is happening here. It seems this is friends, family, and favorites all over again. Why this reluctance into an independent investigation for the Guyana police force?
Well, we must have it. And one of the reasons why, and I'm going to knock you here a little bit, one of the reasons, because you're part of the opposition, one of the reasons why this happens is because we have a very weak opposition. Very embarrassingly weak opposition. And an embarrassingly dislodged and weak civil society. I don't know what has happened to our society in Guyana. We don't have watchdog organizations. Our civil society is very inactive, and it's all because of intimidation. Listen, don't underestimate the toll, the murders, the killings of those 1,400 Black people had on the psyche of the Guyanese people. People are afraid to be killed because they know when they're killed, there's no consequence. If it was like in Africa and Kenya, and I'm not saying this is what should happen, but I'm just giving an example, when they kill somebody, 23 people from their side die too, or there's severe justice where they are punished like the former president of Suriname, we would have accountability and we have justice. But there's no justice. They kill people, kill the Henry boys, kill all these 1,400 people. The society is devastated to such a point where they're saying, well, if there's no network of protection to protect us when we protest against this evil ethnocratic PPP apartheid regime, then why go and put my life in danger? For what? To become a national hero? You don't even get because the opposition even recognizing the people who were killed. We should have a monument. When the Granger administration was in power, we should have had a monument dedicated to those people. Not because the PPP called them criminals. The criminals and the PPP is their culture. It is congenital in the PPP crime. Right? It's congenital. Come down from generation for them in the PPP there. These people were murdered because they were seen as resistant to dictatorship. And look where they went. They went into the bowels of Black communities and killed young Black men. It was a design of ethnic cleansing that Barjagdeo executed. And he's gotten away with it, and now he's driving around with puff chests and talking about who's a criminal. And that's what he wanted to do when he started to label people like Rickford Bork criminal. Right? But he come from a criminal. That's what to tell him what is a criminal. Because he's a criminal and it's congenital. And I'm not afraid to confront them like that. Because there's past Black people. And we need Black leaders in Guyana, Sherrod, who can stand up to these people and their racism. We can't ignore it anymore. And elections are coming up. We have oil money, and they're using this money to now coerce, induce Blacks to come on their side, and some Black people taking the little money and turn against the Black population. Nothing wrong with taking the money and getting contracts. I encourage every Black person to go get a contract. But don't get an inconsequential contract to clean a trench or a drain and think that's something. That's even further insulting Black people when the East Indians are getting billions of dollars in contracts. And they have the gall to boast about the little $3 million contract they give black people to clean a trench or whatever it is. But the fact that these people can murder us, Sherrod, murder our brothers and sisters, and turn around and gloat about it, and then go and pay black people to come on their side. Those blacks that are accepting their money and coming, not legitimately, but taking inducement to back them, have the blood of black people on their hands.
Yeah, yeah, and you know,
I feel very strongly about this.
As you're on very, very strong allegations. You know, again, that Rick Ford has pointed out, we need justice on.
Yes,
that justice demands, and you're talking about some of these challenges that we have had. Many say, Rick Ford, that there's a lot of work being done quietly behind the scenes. You've helped with lots of this. We've seen for instance, the UN Human Rights Committee work. We've heard the grilling of the PPP. We saw a lot of pushback from the committee based on what's happening at home, and also we've had to deal with the revelations coming out of the U.S. Treasury Department on gold smuggling and the sanctions that emanated from that. I wanted to have your impression of those strides that are being made.
Well, it's historic. And it should not be lost on anyone that both people who are sanctions are senior members of the PPP. Cannot be lost on us. Senior members of the PPP. Historic. First in Guyana, you have members of a sitting government sanctioned. May Thomas is an executive member of the PPP, Central Committee member of the PPP, highest ranking public official in the ministry, public servant in the ministry of Home Affairs. Then you had an elected official in Shell Mohammed, who is a PPP elected member of the NDC, Eccles Ramsburg. And so the PPP tried to make it sound as though these people are isolated. They're members of the PPP.
Yeah.
And everybody,
members,
everybody
financiers
around them is involved in the scandal. I like the fact that the U.S. ambassador, when asked, said she's not aware of any other investigation. Trust me, all of them are on the investigation. But she was just being diplomatic in saying that she's not aware of any investigation. You continue to see them being stopped at the airports. We never saw that in the Granger administration. It is because of the corruption, because of the innate congenital criminal conduct. And what amazed me, Sherrod, is that the United States government was able to collect this intelligence and evidence in Guyana. And the PPP is saying, we can't do anything unless the US shares that information with us. The information is in Guyana.
And the US says that your permanent secretary was receiving bribes for big contract.
Yes.
Your permanent secretary was compromised. And this is the second one, because as a policing operation, Senator Sharon Hicks, who was the permanent secretary for the Indigenous Affairs Ministry, was caught taking bribes. A policing operation.
Yes.
Right? Their permanent secretaries, their ministers are compromised. That's what the report says. And this was over, I think, 13 departments here, institutions here, coordinated for this investigation, saying that ministers were compromised, permanent secretaries were compromised. And then we had, not forgetting, the Isabel Young interview, the Vice News interview, which the Chinese nationals were saying, again, ministers are compromised. But I think the
vice president was on tape, caught on video negotiating a bribe, $5.5 million bribe.
In a living room. And he's going to want to come on Thursday and talk about you living in a basement in the US. You weren't caught on a tape, saying that, Sue works on the private sector side, any government side. Sue has all the support, makes all the arrangement, but he wants to indict you to go back to Georgetown to face charges, and no investigation into the vice president and those.
Well, that's not. He's not serious because he's trying to shut me up. And with regard to this basement thing, Guyanese should know that it is intended to be a racist epithet. Yeah. Right? He wants to demonstrate that black people live in subhuman conditions. I own 2 homes in the United States. Both of them are over $1 million.
Well, now he's going to come and say, you've been raising money.
yeah. But that's he's projecting. He's projecting everything that he accuses somebody else of. That's what he's like Donald Trump, right? He admires Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, his protege and assistant Robin Singh likes to write all of these things about supporting Trump and this and that and that. And what I'm not sure what they're going to do.
We saw an official state visit by Pompeo, Trump's Secretary of State, and an unofficial one as well with Pompeo. Who knows what transactions are being
and
made.
Don't forget that the Trump political advisors were their political advisors for the campaign. So they've tied themselves to the Republican Party. And if you notice what they're doing in executing their racist plan, it's parallel to Project 2025. They've had their Project 2020 going on, which is ethnic cleansing, racial discrimination, and subjugation of the Black community, and economic genocide against Black people. That's the PPP plan. And they're trying to cover it up by throwing 1 or 2 contracts at Blacks and throwing parties and give them free tickets and so on. I want to say something to my young brothers and sisters in Guyana. Stop selling yourself so cheap and accepting these tickets to go and jump up in a party and feel nice and say the PPP was good to you. That's an insult to our African, indomitable African foreparents who were slaves, who fought people like the people in the PPP, because they are modern colonialists. Our foreparents fought slave owners, the type of which are in the PPP right now. And so when we allow ourselves to be induced by their material things, like tickets to concert and couple wash dal, water dal, plates of food, and colorless barbecue chicken, and tasteless cook-up rice. No, don't sell ourselves so short. We have a responsibility to carry out the legacy of the Black slaves, which is fight for justice for our people, fight for economic independence, make sure that we have good moral values, ensure that we live decent, fulfilling lives, prosperous lives, and that we have economic wealth, and that we have equality, equal rights, equity. Those are the things that the slaves taught us, right? They were the first business people from our race. Mm-hmm. They pooled their money. They started cooperatives. They pooled their money and they bought villages.
Correct.
They were the first engineers, civil engineers. They built things. The slaves built Guyana. The slaves built the White House. The slaves built Congress. We should learn the lessons of the slaves. The slaves, I know no part of history where the slaves were partying and backballing and collecting money for going wind up. No, we must cut it out.
Even says the slaves came for betterment, but that's another story. You know, we talking about contracts and about Guyanese not accepting less than they deserve. I think that's what you mentioned. I want to make some qualifiers, because I know lots of folks at the ERC and a lot of other places can be parsing this and say, "Oh, hey, look, he's talking there about killing Guyanese and so on." We don't mean that.
No, but Sharissa, I don't care what the ERC thinks. I live in America. We have freedom of speech here. The ERC can't monitor my speech. They must go and monitor Bar Jagde's speech when Bar Jagde called the Black members of the GDF criminals and rapists. He said that to his people at Babu John.
And call our journalists Karen Crows and vultures and so on.
And tell Black people we live in basements. And those racist epithets. So the I don't care what the ERC
and sadly you're going to hear Rickford Bork of the opposition don't like our Indo-Guyanese brothers and sisters. When we talk about the PPP, we talk about many of them in the leadership of the PPP who are racist.
Of course they are. And I make no apologies for my views about standing up for Black people and pointing out racism. There are Blacks who are racist too. I'll speak out against them whenever I see it. But I live in America. where we have freedom of speech.
Land of the free.
I live in America where we point out racism. I live in America where we challenge racism. I live in America where, regardless of what other people think, we express our values. And part of my value system is that I am abhorrent. I abhor racism. And to me, what I see in the PPP is the worst form of racism. It is apartheid. It must stop, and this generation must stop it. Oh, sorry. Almost threw it on your camera.
One of the things I wanted to end the discussion talking about, and you made a very powerful segue into it, is contracts. We've talked for a long time about what Comrade John coined as friends, family, favorites. You've added the recent flatterers, contracts to them. And Jangjo came out recently and admitted that they've been getting contracts. Families have been getting numerous contracts because the wife registered a company yesterday, the son registered one, his sister registered one, and so one family could get 15 contracts. And we've seen the effect of this, and lots of contracts not being able to finish on time, or the substandard work, which permeates most of the contracts. And this is huge kickbacks to families, and which ultimately find their way to the PPP. We heard one official in region, I think was it 2 or 3, who was selling hot dogs with cash grants.
Of course. And nothing happened.
Nothing happened. But Jagdu said now, with less than a year out from national regional elections,
Exactly.
Must stop now. We've had our coffers full.
Exactly, because the PPP got all the kickbacks they wanted, right? and there's international scrutiny as well. It's really hot. I'm sweating. But this is the bottom line. They set out to do it, Sherrod. They set out. They know how many people they want to make millionaires. They know how they want to give contracts. They know who they want to give the contracts to. They know how much money they'll get back when they give out contracts to their fellow their members of their party, their supporters, their cousins, or whatever it is. And that's what they're doing. Do you know how the oil money is spent? Do you know that? Have you ever seen? Exactly.
We don't know.
These guys are taking the country's oil money and spend it on infrastructure. Their major thing is infrastructure. You know why they're focusing on infrastructure? That's where the corruption is. Procurement fraud. They can allocate $60 billion to some pump station somewhere and give it to some man named Critics. Nothing but building pump or no. Nothing. But he gets some $1 billion contract. Why? Because he is Barrett Jagbe's jabon of an ass. Puppet who can attack Sherrod Buncan and Rickford Burke. So he gets $1 billion contract. That's how they reward the people. And you know what? Up to now, the pump can build, the equipment, this, that. And that is why we need some sort of commission of inquiry, Sherrod. We cannot allow this thing to happen. This is our money. This is the country's money. This is not a PPP money. This is not Barrett Jagby money. These people taking the country money and do all kind of things. To me, for every contract that the PPP gives out, it is front-loaded with a kickback for the PPP. So, and if you see a contract for $400 billion, $100 million going back to Barrett Jack, there was somebody in the PPP, allegedly. Right? That is how these people are getting rich. Procurement fraud. And the country seems paralyzed, helpless to do anything about it.
But we have lots of legislation on the books. We don't have to go and invent stuff. We don't have to, if as you were talking about earlier on about just enforcing what is.
Right.
What is? We saw one minister 1 week into his tenure when he came in 2020, he gave contracts to family business.
Yes. And nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
So up to now, they're in government for 4 years. I have not seen one account of how a penny from the oil money is spent. These people drained the whole sovereign wealth fund. Just the other day, they dragged, $62 billion?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Nothing is being saved.
They are
spend, baby, spend.
And that's what it is. The sovereign wealth fund is a fund for the future, for posterity, what they're leaving for us, our children.
As a matter of fact, where it concerns the National Resource Fund Act, the coalition government has said, you must know how the money is being spent, how whatever portion is to national development is being spent. Yeah,
right.
They changed the law. They said, no, we don't want you to know. We can mix all with the budget, and we can spend on whatever we want to spend it on.
And you know what? I mean, the opposition objected to it in Parliament, but they don't have the votes. They have the one-seat majority. The civil society is quiet. The religious community is quiet. And they got one-seat majority, They are running the country as if they have a two-thirds majority in Parliament.
Well, they just stole a seat from Anug and Lipton Justice in Asha Kisoon.
And they stole one from the AFC,
2010, 2011?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
this is where we are. Final thing, you can throw in anything you want to throw in as we wrap up. But oil producing country, fastest growing economy, biggest GDP, high income country, all of that. Major blackout recently. The national airport shut down. No power. A power ship was rented recently. The same birds eating out the wire. That breakdown.
It's taking water.
Yeah, healthcare in a mess. We talked about crime, the Guyana police force, education in a terrible state. We recently got the convention's results. We're working in this.
Well, the country's falling apart. And that's the epitome of PPP governance. The PPP does not know how to govern a country. The only thing the PPP know how to do is kill black people and thief. Let me repeat it. The only thing the PPP knows how to do is kill black people and thief money. They're no longer managing no country. They're not interested in governing the country. They are interested in pretending to be a government and filling their pockets. That's the summary essence of PPP governance in Guyana. And for any Guyanese, regardless of your background, ethnic background, regardless of your political affiliation, if you want to see Guyana develop and progress, we have to get rid of the PPP government. We need a broad-based government, a government that you can call national unity. Some people call it coalition, however you describe it. Mm-hmm. But it must have a component from every segment of the society, governing the country in the interest of everybody. You must have a plan to empower black people. You must have a plan to empower Eastern, but they've already been empowered. You must have a plan to empower poor people, including everybody, all races. You must have a plan to empower the Chinese and the Portuguese. That's a part of everybody. And you must have a national development, should I say, strategy that encompasses all these interests. Because if you don't do that, the country's not going to go forward. Because in order to develop a country, in order to have significant economic, social transformation, the entire country has to be behind a plan. And right now, the only people who are being empowered is PPP supporters. We can't have a country, Sharad, where because you and I are friends, you can't get government contract. Because you and I are friends and I'm supporting the opposition, your business cannot flourish. That's untenable. And that's the kind of government Bart Jagde runs. That's the kind of government Irfan Ali runs. That's the kind of government the PP runs. If you don't support them and you support the opposition, you can't thrive, you can't prosper, you can't have a viable citizen. You can't be a viable citizen in society. You can't have a viable business. You can't have a viable profession. How can we continue to live like that? How can we? You have black businesses that are being sabotaged because they're giving money to the opposition.
Or perceived to be giving money.
Or perceived to be giving money.
Yep.
But the Indians who own businesses could give money to the PPP and nothing will happen to them. Their businesses thrive. As a matter of fact, you give me money, we give you more contracts, we give you more business, we give you a procurement business, and you give you a kickback. How can we continue to live like this? If I'm a doctor and I'm perceived to be supporting the opposition, I can't get a proper job at the Georgetown Hospital. I can't get promoted. Man, what nonsense we doing? And we accepting this because Barja, they're going to put Hicken to shoot you, Hicken to get the police officers to shoot you and kill you if you protest and object it. What kind of country is this? It has to stop. And I said, this generation must end it. We must not pass this down to one more generation. If the PPP wants to be a racist party, let them come out of government. Let them come out of government and go and build some island and let them go and live there by themselves. But allow the rest of us who want to live in harmony and peace, who want social cohesion, who want government for everybody, who wants an inclusive society to govern the country.
Yeah, as you were talking there again, I wanted to add context with that is not just Bluster, but when people came in, for instance, we saw them going after Cartier, we saw them going after Sevron, we saw them going after a number of other persons, and a way that we didn't see them going after our Indo-Guyanese brothers and sisters who are business.
The only East Indians they went after are people who supported the opposition.
Yeah.
And they didn't go after them.
BK, for instance.
Exactly, BK. They supported them because of their association with people from the opposition who are black. That's it. Fundamentally, I have a friend in the PP who tells me, man, I'm making a race out of everything. I'm like, okay. He said, it's not race, it's politics. I said, but in Guyana, politics is race. Because if you're going to discriminate against your political opponent on a broad, wide scale, therefore you're going to discriminate against blacks. So you can't ignore that factor. You can't ignore the fact that the majority of the people in Guyana who are opposed to the PPP are blacks. And if you are going to discriminate against them allegedly because of politics, then you're doing it based on race. Because in Guyana, whether we like it or not, historically, East Indians support the PPP, blacks support the PNC in mass. It would be wrong also for the PNC or the APNUAFC or whatever you want to call it to discriminate against so-called PPP supporters because they're part of society. They have a stake in the country, and if you do that, you'll be discriminated against East Indians. So we have to acknowledge that as well. But the fact of the matter is that the PP is not willing to admit that they're racist. They're not willing to admit that their policies are based on race. And we have to confront it. And what you mentioned earlier, just when you made the clarification, that they're going to say that we're targeting East Indians. What the PP has been doing over the years is conflating criticism of their racism with criticizing the East Indian population. That's trash. And I don't pay attention to it. Only stupid people would buy into that. We're talking about hardcore PPP people who are racist, who target blacks, who have targeted all of those people from GCOM, who have targeted all of those police officers, who have targeted all of those MP. It's a coincidence. Communities, Linden, all the infrastructure work is being done in East Indian areas. Listen, somebody from the PPP gave me their plan, their development plan, and it is only for East Indian regions. Not in Region 4, the villages that they've targeted for development are East Indian villages. I could pull it up right now and go through it. Region 3, Region 6, Region 5, nothing for Linden. Nothing for Linden. As a matter of fact,
we saw Linden's budget cut.
Exactly. And based on the research Niger Hughes did, where you have the one region, Region 6, that budget allocation from the central government is greater than Region 4, which has over 300,000 people, has the capital city, but it's because it's controlled by the opposition administratively. They don't want to give them the money. You believe this is the PPP money? You believe this is money that Barjack, their father, dead and left in a will, for he distribute? And we cannot continue to run a country like that.
On another note, I'm trying to remember the health sector as we talk about the disproportionality. We were visiting as a parliamentary committee one of the health centers in a heavily PP-dominated area, and so we were asking for the budget for the health center, and they said they don't have it. And we're asking for some other areas in some health centers in some areas that traditionally vote up to AFC, and they didn't want to give us, because we know when we see the figures, they'll be overwhelmingly supportive of the health centers in their areas, and this is the fact of the matter. Personally, I don't want to talk about race, and I don't want to talk about who is Indian and black and all of that. But as you said, this politics has it ingrained in it. People see through those lenses. When you see the budgetary allocations, you see the electoral map. right away. And that's sad because the coalition, and they've got a lot of flack for this, didn't govern like that.
Exactly. But that's the right thing to do. My problem with the coalition again is, one, they did not reward their people adequately. Communities that supported them. This is politics. And the people who bring you to the dance are the people you're supposed to take care of first, or equally. Because the PPP communities, and I want to make this very clear, the PPP communities benefited for 23 years from more services and more resources. And what the APNU, AFC,
plus
right,
4,
right, up to the point when the APNU AFC government went into power, they should have corrected that imbalance by giving adequate resources and developing those communities. They didn't do that. They were short-sighted, and they don't understand governance. I don't think President Ranger understands government. And maybe they would have got into the second term. Unfortunately, they were uprooted. When there's a change in government, we have to make sure we lobby for equity, equality, and an equitable distribution of the wealth of the country, particularly oil and gas resources. We have to ensure. One of the things I am an advocate for is that I want to see a constitutional amendment that speaks to these things, operationalize it. The Board of Cooperations must look a certain way.
Because we're coming out of the past.
Exactly. Like, for instance, when the South African government came out of apartheid, they had to put certain measures in place to bring back balance in the society. That's what we want. We have had decades of discrimination, PPP discrimination, and apartheid government. And I want to see written into the Constitution how resources must be allocated to the regions. It must be written into the Constitution about proportionality of, like, just like you have how women must be in parliament, youth must have so much percentage. I want to see that. We want to see it written into the Constitution or into some sort of legislation about how we would develop the country, a long-term plan. Opening new communities, building new bridges, tunnels, whatever, developing the country. It must be a long-term, like a 25-year plan. And we must dedicate a certain percentage of the budget to that. Let's say 40% of the budget must go towards this plan. So regardless of which government goes into power, we have a development plan, we have a development strategy that is funded. That's what I would like to see. So that we don't have this wishy-washy thing every 4 years, people come in, they develop their people, their villages, and they identify their own projects. Next 4 years go wrong, another government come in. We ain't getting nowhere.
Yeah.
We're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And again, the country always is at suffering a setback when the PPP comes in the power. Right now, Guyana looks fine. It looks like it's developing. But we're not developing. There's no major development project so far. Everything is a rush. And it's either halfway, it's stalled, the road broken up, this, that. Well, they're building a new Demra Harbor. Let's see. The building gas to shore project.
Delayed, delayed. Gas to shore, delayed as well.
Right.
Funding lacking there. No,
but those are not the PPP initiatives, though. They're not PPP initiatives.
Correct. They came in and met the plan.
Exactly.
Bridge. Came in and met the one for gas to shore, and lots of other plans that they're running with now.
The roads that they're building.
Correct. I know, I think tomorrow's Thursday, is it? Tomorrow's Thursday? Yeah, tomorrow's Thursday. As I said, the Vice President going to have you heavy on his mind.
But I understand he's traveling to New York.
I want you to spirit thought for him. And also, as we wrap up, the Guyanese people, where should their mind be? We're heading into this very heavily racialized period in our country. Elections are like that. What should we be thinking about?
Well, I think people should be thinking about where they want the country to go. Do we want a country where you're scared to talk to your neighbor because your neighbors of a different race or political persuasion? Do you want a country where if you own a business, if you're not subjecting yourself to the influence of Barjad and the PPP, your business can't thrive? Do you want a country where only certain people are getting contracts? Do you want a country where only certain people can become rich? And there's no equality, there's no social justice, there's no equal rights or equal justice, there's no equity. Is that a country we want? Or do we want a country where there's fairness for everybody, where everybody benefits equally from the national patrimony, and the oil and gas resources and other resources of the country, where the regions are allocated the resources that they deserve so that they could develop their people and so that they could provide services for their people? Is that the country we want? I think so. And so we must choose based on wisdom and sound judgment, and not based on emotion or political instinct, right? Or political allegiance. That's not what or because somebody can bribe you, right? And if you choose well, you would choose any other party than the PPP, because the PPP is a party that wants to enrich themselves. And that's why I'm supporting Niger Youth. I'm supporting Niger Youth because I embrace his vision for equality. I embrace his vision for economic development that benefits everybody. Everybody. I support his vision because he wants to see the country develop for our young people. He wants to see equitable development. He wants to see equal justice. He wants to see equal rights. And that's why I'm supporting Nigeria, and I want to encourage the rest of the country to support Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Rick Ford.
Thank you.
For this time, I'm in your domain, I'm in your jurisdiction.
And I plan to come to your party or your reception. I'm going to crash it.
Meet and greet.
Meet and greet. I'm crashing it and coming and make a whole lot of noise.
And as Rick Ford took us there, it's happening on the 3rd. The date, the place, location is available. And we're going to keep sharing that. We want to see as many of you who are out here in Brooklyn, especially Queens and the other boroughs that are close by, do come out. It's on Saturday coming, the 3rd. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you there.
And last word to all the Guyanese in the United States, vote Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Make sure you go out, motivate your friends and your family, get registered, vote early. I'm not going to say vote many times. I'm just going to say vote early and ensure that your vote counts, especially if you live in a swing state. Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, go out and vote. Nevada, go out and vote. We supporting Kamala Harris.
All right, there it is.